Such nostalgia, that PlayStation 1 intro screen. That's right, everybody. We are now entering the 5th generation era of gaming, and continue with this X Marathon is my number 1 in the series, Megaman X4. Now, instead of looking at the collection like the past videos, we're actually going to be going back in time to 1998 and look at the PlayStation 1 version of the game. Now, even though I have the US version right here, I also have the Japanese version, which we'll be taking a look at, and for a few things. Well, first off, the way the title screen appears in the English version is actually generic, and so is the intro music that goes along with it. The Japanese version did better. Plus, you gotta admit, the Japanese limited edition cover for the Sega Saturn version of the game looks epic at best, with Zero standing in a dark room with his Z-Saber at the ready. So epic.
Also, I'd rather not hear the atrocious English voice acting on both cutscenes and gameplay, so don't expect any Zero bad voice internet memes in this video.
So we're going to boot up the game via the EPSXE emulator and not the PlayStation 1 because, well, my PlayStation 1 is no longer functional. I could have done it instead on the PlayStation 2 or PlayStation 3 and recorded via the Elgato, but setup is going to take too long for me, and since I do have Bandicam on my PC, I'll definitely save time that way. So, continuing with the X Marathon, the battle for peace continues with Megaman X4. The late 90s. Definitely the best time to be a PlayStation 1 gamer. Especially being exposed to the likes of Crash Bandicoot 1 and 2, Street Fighter EX, Klonoa, Air Guys God Bless the Ring, which is my very first review video if you haven't checked it yet. And of course, Megaman X4. Now, long before the advent of the Game Informer magazine, I find myself going through many stores just trying to check out, browse, or even buy magazines that shows upcoming games. Whether it be EGM, GamePro, or one of my favorite video game magazines at the time, GameFan.
GameFan, I wish you didn't discontinue. You were the reason I was exposed to many PlayStation 1 games, and it was in this issue that I see the ad of Megaman X4. Explosive gameplay, extreme graphics, man, the 90s magazines were known for hyping games, and this ad really speaks the truth. And GameFan was also the reason I was exposed to Metal Gear Solid, or then previews of great 90s anime at the time. I had to deal with tight controls in the 16-bit X games, but when the 32 and early 64-bit consoles hit the scene, gaming went up the whole new level, and when I tried out X4 in a gaming cafe for the first time, I had to have my uncle get me this game. And I had no regrets having it because this game is a godsend. Like the CD and PC versions of X3, X4 also has anime cutscenes that are of better quality. And as for the overall gameplay, oh, it's so lit, man.
So let's not waste any more time and let's get on with the game already. Goodness, I feel so edgy.
As you select new game, you're given a choice of which hunter story you want to play. Both hunters go the same routes, but their plots will somewhat differ. So just like my Tekken 7 review, I'll do what I can to summarize it as one whole story. Months have passed since the Doppler incident. Maverick crimes are being suppressed thanks to the alliance between the Maverick Hunters and the Repliforce, a special Reploid military police faction conceptualized by Dr. Kane that would provide support for the Maverick Hunters to increase their response time and further reduce Maverick activity. However, this proved ineffective and Maverick activity suddenly increased at an alarming rate, and with wide-scale rioting causing destruction around the globe, Repliforce was considered ultimately ineffective and itself potentially dangerous, and be labeled Mavericks, despite showing little or no signs of doing so, and just do as they please, further proving Thomas Light's warnings of possible free will misuse. One stormy night at the Repliforce HQ, a cloaked figure is in a meeting with the HQ's leader, General, claiming that the Maverick Hunters are a threat to the world and do everything they can to please humanity and steal Repliforce's thunder. General outright dismissed the cloaked man's warnings as ridiculous, as his army has no intention of harming humans, so it's on to Plan B. Back in the Maverick Hunter HQ, Zero isolates himself in silence until he experienced the vision of a shadowy man, in which any Mega Man gamer can easily point out as Dr. Wily, telling his creation Zero to carry out his mission before disappearing. This resulted in Zero having painful thoughts going through his head, when he also sees other visions such as an area full of carnage. Zero then wakes up from his dreams and he and X were summoned to the control room, but not before Zero proclaimed that he couldn't shake off those visions. X and Zero were deployed to the aerial colony Sky Lagoon, which is under Maverick attack and is on the verge of collapse. Our heroes were sent to assist in the evacuation effort, and as they entered the reactor room, Magma Dragoon of the Hunters' 14th Unit was spotted, telling the Hunters that there's no way to stop it and tells them to also escape. Although the evacuation of the colony's residents was successful, the force of the colony's collapse was so massive, casualties have increased in a staggering rate. As the Hunters search through the wreckage, they come across a female Reploid named Iris, a love interest of Zero's who happens to barely survive the collapse. Just as they were about to help her escape, a giant half-wolf dragon mechanoloid named Eregion appears to attack the Hunters, but to no avail as it somehow couldn't beat the Hunters despite its ginormous design. After the fight, the Colonel of the Repliforce appears, a once friendly rival of Zero who was searching for his sister Iris. Unfortunately, the Repliforce was also present at the scene of the incident. They were put under suspicion, and Colonel was asked that the Repliforce must surrender for questioning, which he refused, and he would rather accept a warrior's death, whether it be labeled Maverick or not. The next day, General, who is indignant of the suspicion, decides to start a coup d'etat to create a nation where only Reploids can reside in peace. However, because the Repliforce now have bounties marked on them, the Maverick Hunters, under a new unseen commander and not Dr. Kane, presumably passed on through old age, are sent to arrest them, unaware that the cloaked man from General's meeting was the one getting both sides to destroy each other. Back at the base, Iris suddenly shows up and acts as Zero's navigator while also tries to stop the tension between the Hunters and Repliforce. At the same time, a rookie hunter named Double was recruited and assigned as X's navigator, and it's then that both hunters will be sent to stop the rebelling Repliforce while also taking down Reploids that have also gone Maverick prior to the incident. Starting with X4, both hunters now have contrasting styles. X is still the long-distance hunter, while Zero is now the melee fighter, no longer using his Z-Buster and is no longer relegated to being chopped liver, at least his limited usage anyway like he was in X3, original version. Unlike past games, one of the biggest praise I have with this game from the start is how very smooth the controls are, eliminating the tight controls from its predecessors. That's not to say that the past games really did have tight controls, though Zero in the original X3 kinda did. It's just that Capcom needed more time during the 4th generation era to have controls that would later be refined with each passing game, and while I did get used to it, the controls in X4 just feels more fluid in comparison. I mean heck, I do love holding that dash button and do quick jumps for faster progression. Many of the stages have interesting gimmicks this time around, and what's great is that this game has the best stage designs that are fun to explore for secrets. Taking a page from Sonic 2, 3 and Knuckles, and Mania, each stage has 2 acts with different gimmicks thrown in. Whether you can burn certain parts of Web Spider Act 2 for shortcuts, taking to the skies in Storm Owl's stage, or jumping from one train car to another in both acts of Slash Beast. Other gimmicks include a speedrun simulator in Cyber Peacock Act 1, where you have to achieve rank S in order to acquire secret items, shoot and dash in Jet Stingray's auto-scrolling hoverbike stage, or finding your way in the volcano. Really, the graphics are very rich in detail, and the great use of coloring made every stage in the game so vivid and lively, especially on Web Spider Act 1 and Storm Owl Act 1. I should also mention that the soundtrack of the game is wonderful, but the music in the intro movie in the English version is too generic, while the Japanese intro music translated as Unbeatable Love I Surely Have by J-pop singer Yukie Nakama sounded better, though I chose not to play that song in the video due to laws and just researched the song instead on YouTube. Now that we're on the 5th generation era of gaming, gone is the password system, so you better make sure you have a memory card in handy if you're planning on saving the game. As for secrets, you still have heart tanks to grab, E-tanks to catch, which has been reduced to 2 now in this game, a new W-tank which fills up weapon energy and can be filled up by collecting weapon icons, and the new EX tank, which lets you start off with 5 lives whenever you get a game over or load your game. Speaking of E-tanks, it has been significantly improved. In the first 3 games, you need to collect HP items while in full HP in order to fill them up. But starting with X4, you don't need to be in full HP in order to fill them, as every time you collect an HP item, there will be a sound, indicating its refill functionality. The W-tank doesn't have a sound indicator, but still has the same function as the E-tanks in this game. Unlike X3, it's back to just 4 Dr. Light capsules. Well, make that 4.5, and I'll explain why. And for a game like X4, it's more than enough, and it's buffed in comparison to X3. The boots give mid-air dash and hovering, helmet for
infinite ammo,
body armor for added defense, and a new Giga attack called Nova Strike, which just like in past games, can only be filled up by taking hits. And in Storm Owl Act 2, there are 2 different X-Buster parts that you can only choose one. The first Buster part allows you to stock up to 4 charge shots, and you can charge your special weapons. The second Buster part allows for a gigantic charge shot which, if connected, will leave damaging orbs in its wake. And you can also charge your special weapons as well. I think the choice is obvious that you much rather take the second capsule and not the first one. I've mentioned that the helmet gives you
infinite ammo
for special weapons. In actuality, only for normal special weapon shots. It's only when you use a charged version of a special weapon will it use ammo, which is situational in Magma Dragoon Act 2, as you need whatever Buster part you chose, followed by charging Slash Beast's Twin Slasher on those rocks to gain access to the body armor. Also, you may wonder why I'm playing Zero in black armor in this review, but we'll get to it soon. Only 2 right armors exist in this game. The first is the Eagle. By jumping in the air and pressing jump again, the right armor can hover for an infinite amount of time, and will only descend if jump is pressed, or if it is struck by an enemy attack. It also exhibits 2 attacks: uncharged shots that are large masses of plasma, and charged shots that split into 3 rays that home in on enemies. This is one of the few right armors in the series that can also perform an air dash. The second is the Raiden, and not the Metal Gear character or that gibberish yelling nutjob of a thunder god whose name is pronounced differently. It can survive an infinite amount of time in lava and can destroy certain rock walls in Magma Dragoon Act 2 and train cars in Slash Beast Act 2. The Raiden can also perform a combo of 2 slashes if the fire button is pressed twice, and an overhead energy slash. It can also perform a charge attack, Drilling Stab, which produces a lance of energy that is thrust forward. As for the 8 Mavericks, they are by far the ones with the best fights, and when you strike them with their respective weaknesses, they stagger more than in past games. And even if you don't have their weaknesses, the patterns of these Mavericks, even when they're low on HP, are actually fun to study, except for one, and that's Jet Stingray. When you start your match against him, you'll never know how he'll attack first. Whether he'll sit ground hunters on your face, or charge at you at the start. Many of the special weapons for X, and special moves for Zero, are not only effective in combat, but just like X1, they're also multi-purpose. Such as using fire not only to create some shortcuts, but also destroy some frozen structures to get items. Or using Soul Body to destroy traps in Cyber Peacock Act 1, making the speedrun simulator easier and straightforward. Perhaps my favorite of the 8 Mavericks is Magma Dragoon, who is revealed to be the perpetrator behind the Sky Lagoon's fall to Earth. He may be a self-centered jerk, personality-wise, but his overall design and fighting style makes him one of the best Mavericks. He utilizes a flamethrower attack, and Street Fighter moves such as the Hadouken, Shoryuken, and Akuma's dive kick, but no Tatsumaki Senpu Kyaku, sadly, or else he would have been a complete Ryuken and Akuma clone. His weakness is the double Cyclone from Storm Owl as X, and Raijin Geki from Web Spider as Zero. But if you don't have either one, if you're skilled enough, you can take Dragoon down with the Raiden Ride Armor, as you can also step in lava while riding it. After defeating Dragoon, it was revealed that he was enticed by the same cloaked man into going Maverick and start the incident to get both sides to fight each other, but his own desire was for him to actually fight X and Zero to prove himself in a fight, which he had fulfilled selfishly. After defeating your first 4 Mavericks, a video message was sent by the Colonel to the Hunters HQ to fight him in a duel. Two things differ between stories. As X, you're actually fighting Colonel head-on. He'll attack you with 3 shockwaves and a teleport slash which really hurt. He'll withdraw soon enough after you win. Canonically, if you're playing as Zero, a cutscene plays out with both men in a lightsaber duel that was eventually halted by Iris, forcing both sides to a draw. Colonel, who regarded Zero as a friendly rival, walked away, while Zero stated that someone had to stop Reploforce at all costs, much to the grief of Iris, and returns to HQ. However, after you're done with the 8 Mavericks, the Reploforce have then started the coup at the spaceport, and the Hunters are rushing to the scene, only to be stopped by Colonel, who is now more improved than previously. Canonically, Colonel dies in a duel with Zero, giving Reploforce the time they needed to migrate their final weapon into space, as well as hoping to establish a nation for themselves. X and Zero proceeded to the launching site of the final weapon, while back at the hangar of HQ, Double was receiving word from someone to start attacking Hunters to avoid any reinforcements from assisting them, and that's when Double starts transforming into his true form, eliminating subordinates assigned to X and goes on to pursue X himself. At the final weapon launch site, X and Zero decide to split up for an attack, unbeknownst to them that each will be facing an unexpected challenge. X encounters Double, who transforms yet again and has 2 weaknesses: firing your charge shot or using Double Cyclone against him, which you really don't want to do, because using Double Cyclone on him will cause small blobs of his body to break off and start attacking X, making him the only boss in Mega Man history in which using his weakness against him will actually benefit him in battle, in conjunction with what little room you have in order to outmaneuver him. After he's defeated, he reveals that he's been planted as a spy in order to throw the Hunters off guard, catering to his namesake Double, in that he's a double agent working for his benefactor who created him, though he would also have a personality that he would have a thought of also betraying his benefactor as well, just for the sake of his own desire of relentless bloodshed. He's then scrap metal following his last words. In another route, Zero comes across Iris, feeling distraught from the loss of her brother Colonel. Though she has no grudge against Zero, she used the power of Colonel's core that she picked up from his remains and fights Zero in ride armor form, as if she's honor-bound to continue where Colonel left off. Floating mines will be released out of the body whenever you strike her, and it's the only way to force the core out, which is your real target. Be careful, as every few seconds, especially after the core is exposed, Iris will back off to a corner of the room and fire a large laser beam horizontally from her cannon, as well as vertically when the core is present. Although not intentional, but forced to do so, Zero damaged the core enough that it would destroy the armor. However, Iris' fusion with the salvage control chip that's meant only for Colonel also fried her programming, causing it to be irreparable. Zero hurried to Iris' body, but it was too late to save her, and while she lay dying in his arms, she whispers to him that she did all this because she wanted them to live in a Reploid-only world, which Zero responds that such dreams are impossible, implying that help from humans are needed for them to also survive and walk the moral path. Iris smiled one last time before she passes on after confessing her affection towards him. Zero, overwhelmed by her death, began questioning his own reasons for fighting, becoming the infamous "What am I fighting for" scene.
Again, no Zero memes at this video. And also, seeing as how Iris' body is not completely destroyed, You gotta wonder why they didn't just take the body back to Earth and just gave her a new programming chip replicating just the positive memories. Kinda like that one Sega CD game that I wish to review in the future.
The Hunter's Rendezvous as the final weapon has already launched into space, and they soon encounter General, who is easier to take down as X, while difficult to fight him as Zero. After an intense fight, the final weapon started to shake, confirming that someone else is in control of the weapon, and the hunters rush to find the source. After defeating the 8 revived Mavericks, which in my opinion is actually fun to do in this game than in previous games, X and Zero are heading towards the reactor room, where the Cloaked Man appears before them, revealing himself to be Sigma, who has been manipulating both sides to fight amongst themselves in order to hijack the final weapon to destroy not only the two factions, but also Earth itself.
That's our scumbag!
If you're playing as Zero, Sigma reveals a portion of Zero's past involving their first encounter that possibly made Sigma a Maverick, which I had summarized in my X1 video, only now in full motion video. In this flashback, we see Zero going all berserk and fights with Sigma, who has the upper hand at first, until Zero managed to sever Sigma's left hand. It looked like Zero was about to finish off Sigma until the letter W starts flashing in his head, causing Zero to go into an aneurysm episode, leaving him open for Sigma to punch Zero's headpiece, rendering Zero unconscious. Sigma's men were shocked to see Sigma damaged, but Sigma tells his men to salvage Zero and have Dr. Kane analyze him. And that's the last time we'll hear Dr. Kane's name in the whole series. After the flashback, the hunters proceeded to fight Sigma, and your first round against Sigma in death form is the only time in any X-Series game where you cannot progress without using a special weapon. In this case, fire. Once the robes are burned off, Sigma then attacks by throwing his scythe, with energy surging out of it whenever it touches a floor or a wall. In this form, his weakness is electricity. After that match, X and Zero fall down to the core, where another of Sigma's forms awaits them, only now 2 more forms, Cyborg and Slime, making it 4 forms in total for Sigma in this game alone. These forms have separate HP bars, so you better hope you still have energy in those E-tanks. In between forms, Sigma will send out primary color-coded mini-heads, each representing an element, and they disappear either by their attacks ending, or destroying whoever attacks you first. And those heads are capable of sending instant kill spikes, so don't get caught by it. Sigma concedes defeat, but not before telling the hunters that there's no way the weapon can be stopped now. Just then, General shows up, admitting his mistake that he and his forces have been played for chumps, and to make up for their mistakes, he sacrificed his body to stop the weapon, allowing the hunters to escape.
Canonically, both X and Zero are at the final weapon, defeated Sigma together, and also escaped. However, given the space limitations on both CDs of the PlayStation 1 and Saturn at the time, the game was programmed to make it seem like only one actually made it to space to take on Sigma at the final weapon.
As they're riding the escape ships to headquarters, X and Zero contemplate the events and those who perpetrated the Great Repliforce War, and they can only come to the same question, whether or not it's possible for Reploids to eventually go Maverick on their own, by their own decisions, even themselves at some point of their lives. Also, this ordeal is the darkest chapter in Zero's life thus far, and while he didn't want to kill the Repliforce, he had to do what's being told of him, rendering him unable to save anyone from this incident, and wonders whether or not what he did was of moral value. With questions still running through their minds, they safely return to Earth, ending Megaman X4.
The story is very well written, but also you can't help but feel sorry not only for the hunters, but also the Repliforce as well. Being played by Sigma like that, trying to kill each other while Sigma is trying to destroy Earth. You just can't help but feel sorry for those that are actually involved in being played for chumps. In fact, the very same sorrowful tone will be used again in later games. Overall, Megaman X4 delivers not only on great graphics and sound, but also on story, and best of all, the gameplay. I can't stress enough how beautiful the controls are in this game, and mowing down Mavericks one after another with either hunter brings, pardon the pun, excellent satisfaction. And Megaman X4 is also the first game in the Mega Man X series that uses cheat codes. And by entering certain commands while highlighting a certain hunter, brings something very rewarding, which you'll have to research on GameFAQs to find out, because I might be here all day if I explain how to input them.
If you enter the commands for X correctly, you'll start off at Sky Lagoon with his arms and legs all purple instead of cyan. Just proceed the game normally until you come across any Dr. Light capsule, preferably at Web Spider Act 1. When you enter the capsule, you immediately earn the debuting Ultimate Armor, which has all the capabilities of the 4th armor, with the Charge Shot upgrade being the Plasma Shot, and you have Infinite Nova Strike. So you can go to town and speedrun your way while also damaging anybody in your path. Such an awesome addition. If you enter the commands for Zero correctly, Zero immediately dons the Black Zero armor, which in this game is its actual debut. While it is more of a cosmetic change than an enhancement, I still think it looks great on him. Even though his primary red armor is iconic, his black variant made him even more awesome. In fact, these armors are so awesome, I even bought figures of both armors and they look wonderful. Props go to SH Figure Arts for the design.
Whew, man. Megaman X4 delivered on the goods so greatly, it's no wonder why I consider it my #1 X game. To that end, I have no qualms of giving Megaman X4 a perfect 10. This is one game that all X fans should enjoy, because, pardon the pun, everything they've done here, it's very exhilarating. Now before we move on to the next installment, we're gonna go take a look at 2 side games for the GBC that are actually side stories of the games that actually take place way before X4. So coming up next, we're going to be looking at the first of those 2, Mega Man Extreme for the GBC. Until then, this has been Musashi X. I bid you all farewell, take care, and stay tuned!